About 1985, there was an exhibition of paintings in the Ulster Museum in Belfast called The Irish Impressionists. And it was a series of paintings by Irish painters who had learned their trade in Normandy and Brittany, Belgium, places like that, at the end of the 19th century. So I found myself writing a poem based on one of these paintings. And in no time at all, there was a set of 26 poems, all based on the paintings. I'm not going to read all 26, in fact, no. I'm going to read one by a painter called Stanhope Forbes. And what caught my eye was the name Ormsby. The painting was called Miss Ormsby, later Mrs. Homan, 1879. I met Miss Ormsby on her way to the studio to sit for Stanhope Forbes. She stopped to talk, the kind of talk that goes with an open face, intelligent eyes, and, I flatter myself, a trust in the listener. She had toured the galleries, studying the portraits of women. Dulled and unsmiling was the phrase she used, whether society wives, or working girls, or Breton peasants, or dancers, or mothers with their children. They hardly ever looked directly at the painter. Were they really so passive, and were these matters she might broach with Mr. Forbes? She is to marry young Homan, and joked about losing her name. I agreed that Ormsby was a melodious name, a mellifluous name, a name you could set to music, but assured her that Ho-Man was solid and promised much. The weight of the dependable, for example, and a domesticated husband. Warmed and stimulated by this agreeable nonsense, we said our farewells. Months later, when I saw the portrait, she was not smiling, but a smile was in the offing. She was direct and lively in her way, and lovely. Something ascetic there also. The painter, lifted by his subject, had missed nothing. The hair, the eyebrows, the white three-flowered brooch, worn as though she might be a member of a confident new order. Young Mr. Homan will have his work cut out. Lucky, lucky Mr. Homan. A couple of short poems about the death of my father. My father's funeral. The flypaper hung from the ceiling, corkscrews with the weight of dead blue bottles. Not a smidgen of dust anywhere. The house burdened with a non-bearable tidiness that means he will not return. He will not return. I'll catch up with the other one somewhere along the way. This poem is called Altar Boy because I spent a phase of serving on the altar. And this was at a time when the Mass was still said in Latin. You know, the English Mass hadn't yet arrived. So you had to learn, if you were an altar boy, you had to learn off the responses to the priest by heart. And it was a kind of gibberish, you know, because you had no idea what the words meant or what you were saying. You didn't know any of that. You just learned it off by heart. I cycled to town, rehearsing the Latin responses. Dam quel toffee cap you for to me. Me a cowboy, you a cowboy, me a Mexican cowboy. I don my surplice and soutane, ring the handbell and follow the priest onto the altar. The congregation stands. I am the half-priest, perfectly on cue for the next 40 minutes. Old Mrs. Cassidy tells me I'm a great cub. I know this already. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. In the Latin. version of that. We learned the national anthem, which for us, of course, was the Irish national anthem, the national anthem of the Republic of Ireland. I remember we also had to learn that by heart in order to sing it at football matches. So at the age of 12, I was very unfluent indeed in at least 2 languages. This one was called Altar Boy Economics. A wedding paid better than a funeral. We were tipped for smiling and looking cute in photographs. But sometimes a funeral paid better. The mourners are at a loss and wanting to be thought generous. Wedding tips could be displayed with a discreet jingle, but funeral tips were almost secrets, hoarded for rainy days. A christening did not require an altar boy. Christenings were, economically speaking, a dead loss. This poem is called The Hourglass. I think it's a love poem, but I'm the only one who thinks it's a love poem. It's a set of instructions, tongue-in-cheek, set of instructions to my wife as to what I want her to do with my ashes after I've been cremated. So it's a ballad of lamps. The Hourglass. There are a few references in this. There is a place called Inst, which is a big school in the centre of Belfast called Royal Belfast Academical Institution. Everybody calls it Inst. And my entire teaching career was spent in Inst. I taught there for 39 years. Waterstones is a bookstore. The Waterworks is a park in North Belfast. When you collect me from the crematorium in a functional jar, my outcrops and knoblets and angular rough bones processed to a fine ash, instead of scattering me on a gusty day by the lake in the Waterworks Park, or releasing me stealthily from a Waterstones bag on the front lawn of Inst, I want you to sift a handful or two with care into the top half of an hourglass and set me to pass the days on our bedside table. From time to time, tumble me upside down for a posthumous workout, a punctual trickle and fall. If I must be the remains, let me be so as a soft grain in your living. You can look to me daily for an hour of silent company, or tell at a glance you're running late again. Crows again. Too many crows in your poems, blocking the light. I can find only 4, but there and then, for her, I declare a moratorium on crows, an ongoing crow sabbatical. Forbid crows to come within 100 yards of any poem by Frank. An hour later, there are already 6 on the rotten fence, not 80 yards away. The corner boys of Crow City will slouch into the nooks of my next poem, with an air of owning their place. You might as well try to exclude death as us. No poems without crows. Years before I was born, in a hotel in County Fermanagh, which is the part of Ireland and North where I come from, there was an Elvis Presley convention in one of the hotels, and it's something I'd wanted to write a poem about for a long time. And this is the poem, it's called The Elvis Convention. There are a lot of place names here. They're all places in the north of Ireland. The Ballygolly Elvis strutted, chest exposed in white bell-bottoms. Practiced curls of the lip from the Oma Elvis, and a handful of diaphanous scarves to be thrown into the crowd. The Bundoran Elvis managed so much droop on his lopsided smile, he appeared to be having a stroke. Everyone was in a vagus frame of mind, rhinestones fingered as though they were rosary beads. 3 hours later, I sat with the disappointed, their makeup beginning to run. Slowly, they circled back to themselves, morose, deflated, and less than they had been. 40 years in Elvis were lamented, and nothing to show. Already it was too late. Young hip swingers were coming through in Carrickmacross and Caledon and Donegal town, sounding more like the real thing than the real thing. His sunglasses, his glossy sideburns would all go to waste, unless he could reinvent himself as Engelbert Humperdinck, for example, or Roy Orbison, or Johnny Cash. Who would want to be himself any longer than he had to? Mercy, he growls into an imaginary mic, and plays the opening chorus of Pretty Young, like a man who has been practicing. I thought you might get Roy Orbison, I wasn't so sure about Engelbert Humperdinck. This is a kind of departure. I retired in 2010 and was diagnosed as suffering from diabetes. 2 years later, diagnosed as suffering from, Christ, I always forget the name of it, and that's one of the features of the actual disease. Not Parkinson's disease. So I wrote a series of poems about having Parkinson's disease, and I want to read a few of those now. They're not as grim as you're thinking. I mean, I knew myself when I set out to write these that it would be difficult to know where to pitch them. You know, I didn't want them to be too somber, depressing. At the same time, I didn't want to be flippant about the whole thing. It was kind of serious matter. Anyway, I ended up with a sequence of 15 poems. I'm going to read 2 or 3 of them. One of the first things I did when the diagnosis was made was I looked up on the internet jokes about Parkinson's disease. And I must say some of them were very good indeed. Which would you rather have, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's? The answer is Parkinson's, because I'd rather still have my pint than forget where the hell I left it down. Parkinson's disease was called various things before it was called Parkinson's disease. Paralysis agitans, and there's something other called here, I remember 2 of them. This poem that I want to read is called Agitans. And the word suggested something like a fallen hero. Anyway, the poem is called Agitans. My left arm is jealous of my right, the one without a tremor. When right pours a glass of wine or throws a ball, left stifles a mild shiver of reproach. I call him Agitans and let him take charge of the big jug of water, so that the ice tumbles into the glasses like a subsiding glacier. He peaks in the football season when Arsenal play. If they get any better, I'll have to snuggle him tightly to my chest, straitjacket style. Meanwhile, his brother Wright is undeterred by his burgeoning duties, and once only has released his own answering tremor, which is not really good news. Arsenal, by the way, an English soccer team,